little nearer, the character of the land had changed. Now it sloped gently upwards and therefore could not be irrigated. Evidently all this great district was dependent on the fall of timely rains, which had not come that spring. Therefore, although the population was still dense and every rod of the land was under the plough or spade, the crops were failing. It was pitiful to see the green, uneared corn already turning yellow because of the lack of moisture, the beasts searching the starved pastures for food, and the poor husbandmen wandering about their fields or striving to hoe the iron soil. Here the people seemed to know us as the two foreigners whose coming had been noised abroad, and, the fear of famine having made them bold, they shouted at us as we went by to give them back the rain which we had stolen, or so we understood their words. Even the women and the children in the villages prostrated themselves before us, pointing first to the mountain and then to the hard, blue sky, and crying to us to send them rain. Once, indeed, we were threatened by a mob of peasants armed with spades and reaping hooks, who seemed inclined to bar our path, so that we were obliged to put our horses to a gallop and pass through them with a rush. As we went forward the country grew ever more arid and its inhabitants more scarce, till we saw no man save a few wandering herds who drove their cattle from place to place in search of provender. By evening we guessed that we had reached that border tract which was harried by the Mountain tribes, for here strong towers built of stone were dotted about the heath, doubtless to serve as watchhouses or places of refuge. Whether they were garrisoned by soldiers I do not know, but I doubt it, for we saw none. It seems probable indeed that these forts were relics of days when the land of Kaloon was guarded from attack by rulers of a very different character to that of the present Khan and his immediate predecessors. At length even the watch towers were left behind, and by sundown we found ourselves upon a vast uninhabited plain where we could see no living thing. Now we made up our minds to rest our horses awhile, proposing to push forward again with the moon, for having the wrath of the Khania behind us we did not dare to linger. By this evening doubtless she would have discovered our escape, since before sundown, as she had decreed, Leo must make his choice and give his answer. Then, as we were sure, she would strike swiftly. Perhaps her messengers were already at their work rousing the country to capture us, and her soldiers following on our path. We unsaddled the horses and let them refresh themselves by rolling on the sandy soil, and graze after a fashion upon the coarse tufts of withering herbage which grew around. There was no water here, but this did not so much matter, for both they and we had drunk at a little muddy pool we found not more than an hour before. We were finishing our meal of the food that we had brought with us, which, indeed, we needed sorely after our sleepless night and long day's journey, when my horse, which was knee haltered close at hand, lay down to roll again. This it could not do with ease because of the rope about its foreleg, and I watched its efforts idly till at length, at the fourth attempt, after hanging for a few seconds upon its back, its legs sticking straight into the air, it fell over slowly towards me as horses do. "Why are its hoofs so red? Has it cut itself?" asked Leo in an indifferent voice. As it chanced I also had noticed this red tinge, and for the first time, since it was most distinct about the animal's frogs, which until it rolled thus I had not seen. So I rose to look at them, thinking that probably the evening light had deceived us, or that we might have passed through some ruddy coloured mud. Sure enough they were red, as though a dye had soaked into the horn and the substance of the frogs. What was more, they gave out a pungent aromatic smell that was unpleasant, such a smell as might arise from blood mixed with musk and spices. "It's very strange," I said. "Let us look at your beast, Leo." So we did and found that its hoofs had been similarly treated. "Perhaps it is a native mixture to preserve the horn," suggested Leo. I thought a while, then a terrible idea struck me. "I don't want to frighten you," I said, "but I think that we had better saddle up and get on." "Why?" he asked. "Because I believe that villain of a Khan has doctored our horses." "What for? To make them go lame?" "No, Leo, to make them leave a strong scent upon dry ground." He turned pale. "Do you mean those hounds?" I nodded. Then wasting no more time in words, we saddled up in frantic haste. Just as I fastened the last strap of my saddle, I thought that a faint sound reached my ear. "Listen," I said. Again it came, and now there was no doubt about it. It was the sound of baying dogs. "By Heaven, the death hounds!" said Leo. "Yes," I answered quietly enough, for at this crisis my nerves hardened and all fear left me. "Our friend the Khan is out a hunting. That is why he laughed." "What shall we do?" asked Leo. "Leave the horses?" I looked at the peak. Its nearest flanks were miles and miles away. "Time enough to do that when we are forced. We can never reach that mountain on foot, and after they had run down the horses, they would hunt us by spoor or gaze. No, man, ride as you never rode before." We sprang to our saddles, but before we gave rein I turned and looked behind me. It will be remembered that we had ridden up a long slope which terminated in a ridge about 3 miles away, the border of the great plain whereon we stood. Now the sun had sunk behind that ridge, so that although it was still light the plain had fallen into shadow. Therefore, while no distant object could be seen upon the plain, anything crossing the ridge remained visible enough in that clear air at least to persons of keen sight. This is what we saw. Over the ridge poured a multitude of little objects, and amongst the last of these galloped a man mounted on a great horse, who led another horse by the bridle. "All the pack are out," said Leo grimly, "and Rassen has brought a second mount with him. Now I see why he wanted us to leave the spears, and I think," he shouted as we began to gallop, "that before all is done the Shaman may prove himself a true prophet." Away we sped through the gathering darkness, heading straight for the peak. While we went I calculated our chances. Our horses, as good as any in the land, were still strong and fresh, for although we had ridden far we had not overpressed them and their condition was excellent. But doubtless the death hounds were fresh also, for, meaning to run us down at night when he thought that he might catch us sleeping, Rassen would have brought them along easily, following us by inquiry among the peasants and only laying them on our spoor after the last village had been left behind. Also he had two mounts, and for aught we knew, though afterwards this proved not to be the case, for he wished to work his wickedness alone and unseen, he might be followed by attendants with relays. Therefore it would appear that unless we reached some place whither he did not dare to follow before him, that is the slopes of the peak many miles away, he must run us down. There remained the chance also that the dogs would tire and refuse to pursue the chase. This, however, seemed scarcely probable, for they were extraordinarily swift and strong, and so savage that when once they had scented blood, in which doubtless our horses' hoofs were steeped, they would fall dead from exhaustion sooner than abandon the trail. Indeed, both the Khania and Simbri had often told us as much. Another chance, they might lose the scent, but seeing its nature, again this was not probable. Even an English pack will carry the trail of a red herring breast high without a fault of ours, and here was something stronger, a cunning compound of which the tell-tale odour would hold for days. Alas, chance! If we were forced to abandon our horses, we, their riders, might possibly escape, could we find any place to hide in on that great plain. If not, we should be seen as well as scented, and then no, the odds were all against us. But so they had often been before. Meanwhile we had 3 miles start, and perhaps help would come to us from the Mountain, some help unforeseen. So we set our teeth and sped away like arrows while the light lasted. Very soon it failed, and whilst the moon was hidden behind the mountains the night grew dark. Now the hounds gained on us, for in the gloom, which to them was nothing, we did not dare to ride full speed, fearing lest our horses should stumble and lame themselves, or fall. Then it was for the second time since we had dwelt in this land of Kaloon, that of a sudden the fire flamed upon the peak. When we had seen it before, it had appeared to flash across the heavens in one great lighthouse ray, concentrated.